Welcome back, everyone, to another meeting of Diverse Minds. I am so excited to be with you all again. It has been forever. I'm trying to make sure that my sound is on. Yes, it's working. Okay. I am so excited to be back with you all here January of 2022. It has been a minute. I took a break, you all know, the last couple months of the year because I was finishing up my degrees and the holidays were coming, and honestly, I just needed a break. When you're in this work, every once in a while you need a small, short sabbatical. And so I took it in order to just refresh, renew, and get ready to get back into this year. So I'm super excited to be back. Super excited for some of the things that I have planned for this year. Just welcome, because I'm excited to be back with you all. Okay, so you all know my name is Keisha Hamilton, and I'm your host for Meeting of Diverse Minds, where we explore racial equity from a historically authentic lens. That means that we use history to form our perspective, to guide our responses, and as a roadmap to ensure that we are transforming the future. If there's one thing that anyone who is in their right mind and has lived just a short time, well, I guess maybe a little bit longer than a short time, can recognize, the thing that they can recognize is that if you continue to do the same thing, you're going to get the same results. And sometimes you don't know you're doing the same thing if you are not researching to find that information out, to figure out what steps should I take here, what steps have been taken, and which direction should I go. History informs us as to what has occurred, what's worked, what has not worked, and how we need to radically change in order to change and transform the future. And I say radically because so many people are committed to, as our title says for today, to order, this order that has been established in the past that has led us not to where we need to be. So we are very intentional on a meeting of diverse minds to allow history to inform our decisions as we move along. So my area of specialty is based not only on my experience as an African-American woman living in America, living in the North, having lived in the South. It's also based on history that I study. It's based on the experiences and the knowledge that so many other of my ancestors penned and quoted and did interviews on, and now that we're doing shows on and documentaries, etc. All that knowledge, I spend a lot of time just studying. One is just a passion of mine because studying my history helps me to understand how I, as an African-American woman, need to move in this world. It helps me to also make connection with what I'm experiencing, all those different things. And so my specialty, like I said, is based on that information. Obviously, the experiences and things that I've had, as I said, as an African-American woman living in the North and having lived in the South and having been married to a white man. It's a very varied and wide experience that I have. That I like to share in, these conversations that we have. So that's where it comes from, the experience that I have and my perspective. A meeting on diverse minds, I'm hoping to expand. I'm planning to expand this year, some while also kind of not altogether expanding in different ways. So I'm likely going down to 2 shows a month. My own personal life in my community, my community work has just really kicked in a few extra notches, and finding the time to do everything has been a challenge. So I'm likely going to go down to 2 shows a month. Usually we meet once a week on Wednesdays. We'll be meeting likely every other Wednesday. And then I'll also be adding in monthly hosts, different individuals. I'll be having different individuals come on the show, and we'll actually have some conversations with different people who are in the racial equity world, just to kind of have conversations about what we're experiencing, what's going on, different answers, different solutions, suggestions. I'm super excited about having different individuals join us for those shows. So be advised that that's coming. A meeting of diverse minds also last year, this is the last update that I'm going to give you before we'll kind of jump into all the good stuff that we're always talking about. Was fortunate to be awarded a grant last year, our first grant that we wrote for, and the grant was for an experience that I'm going to be creating here in Jackson surrounding the ingredients required for systems change. And there are 8 ingredients that are required. Of course, I won't tell you what those ingredients are because I want you to join this experience, but be excited like I am because that's coming this year. A meeting of diverse minds, like I said, we were awarded our first grant, a large grant, and I am super excited about the partnership that I have with a couple other nonprofits here in Jackson, Black-owned nonprofit organizations that we're putting our heads together and are getting ready to create something amazing for the city of Jackson. So I'm super excited about that, and it's going to be coming. More information about that. So on a meeting with diverse minds, we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism. Out of this experience, I get so many calls and so many different people who are watching the show, and I'm really grateful. I want you all to know that I'm so grateful that you join me every Wednesday, that you stuck with me over this year that we've been doing this. It's been over a year. It'll be 2 years coming up this fall that a meeting of diverse minds with Keisha Hamilton has been operating. I'm super excited about that. But those of you who stuck with us, that, I've mentioned numerous times that so many different people, reach out and ask questions and, just want to have more information, want someone to come and kind of give them some advice and et cetera, et cetera. So out of that, this whole show that we've been doing, was born Diverse Minds Consulting. And that's at www.diversemindsconsulting.com. That's where you can find that. But I created my own business out of this. And you can find there, consultations. I do one-on-ones. I do whole group trainings. I do speaking engagements. I can do cohort trainings, book study trainings for your different organizations, churches, even personally. This experience, while it as human beings, we like to learn with other people, it is a very personal experience, even when you're among a group of people. Excuse me, the decisions that you make in this process are very personal. They're they're very intimate, so like I said, I do one-on-ones with individuals as well. And so feel free to reach out to a meeting of Diverse Minds Consulting LLC. That's at www.diversemindsconsulting.com for more information on that. Like I said, this show, it was born out of just a great need for information. One of the things that we do here on a meeting of Diverse Minds that you're not going to find here in Jackson County, as far as Black-owned Diverse Minds anti-racism consulting firms. I am the only one here in Jackson County. I was just realized that a couple of days ago. So I'm the only one that's led by a woman of color here in Jackson County. But one of the things that I'm very, very, very passionate about is that these conversations that we have, I mentioned already, are historically authentic, and that they are guided by the experiences of those whose voices are not welcomed, and not often heard. The biggest the biggest difference between what I offer and what other places offer that you're going to hear is transformation. That's what I preach. That's what I teach. That's what I'm aiming for. Transformation. How you know whether or not you're getting, anti-racism and DEI correctly is if it's different. So different as in the results or the impact or the recommendations that come from it should not look like patriarchy, should not look like white supremacy, should not look like capitalism, should not look like competition. It shouldn't look like what we've had. It should be very human. People should be uncomfortable. There's no way that you change without discomfort, without some type of agitation. You understand? So it's very important to me that I stay true to that, because for one, history informs us that, me simply, patting you on the back and saying, yeah, you're doing good when you're really not, doesn't bring actual change. And that lack of change, it actually impacts people. People's lives are impacted. People die. Okay, we're dying. Cops are still getting away with murder. Even January 6th, those of you who watched it, we had over 1,000 individuals actually break into our symbol of democracy, the democracy that we all, came, or not all, okay, because we didn't choose to come here to America, but at least the white people who said they came here on the Mayflower and et cetera, all those different places, boats that they came from, said they were coming here so that they could have freedom. That freedom that they supposedly fought for, it was a whole crew of white people, stormed the Capitol on January 6th. And how many of them have been held actually accountable? It helps you to understand there's something wrong with any type of programming around diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism that you're hearing that's not teaching you different transformation. So anyways, Amigo Diverse Minds is very committed to growth, committed to seeing a change in our community, committed to the humanity that's found in respect, in awareness, in action, in accountability, in authenticity. I love doing what I do, in case you haven't noticed. It's very intimate to me and very personal to me. So we'll jump right into defining these things before we jump into our thought for today. I like to be on here for just a little less than an hour, and we're going to stick to that tonight. So let's go ahead and define diversity, equity, and inclusion, because again, we can't really have these conversations with one another if we're not on the same page. As I already mentioned, you're going to find definitions of diversity, equity, inclusion in every space. The way that you gauge and measure and weigh out if this is an actual diversity, if this is actual equity, if this is actual inclusion, if this is actual anti-racism and racial justice, you weigh it out against what has been. Does my diversity, my definition of diversity, my expectation of diversity, is it different than what I have been told as diversity has been? So, let's go back to this affirmative action for a second. Affirmative action came in and said, we want to allow more minorities to ... Okay, school, we were trying to get into the schools, we were trying to get jobs, we were trying to, get a nonprofit stat, just, whatever, okay, affirmative action. Affirmative action, and this is historical knowledge that you can go and research on the Meeting of Diverse Minds with Keisha Hamilton. I don't give you every detail that's available in history. You can come to Diverse Minds Consulting, LLC, and pay for that information. But I give you just enough because I'm hoping that you'll go and look for this information yourself and or reach out so that you can get more information with, Diverse Minds Consulting. But I don't tell you everything in history, because who can tell you everything in history when we've been here for 6,000, 7,000 years or more, or, what is it? Hundreds of thousands of years, you know what I mean? So, but in diversity, is your diversity teaching you that it's not the minority white woman? And affirmative action, how affirmative action came in and said, okay, let's get more minorities in here. And then it ended up being just more white women who were, because they as a woman were considered, a minority. And so they took all those places and spaces that, Black and brown individuals were fighting for, were trying to get. So again, is your definition of what you're talking about, diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism, is it actually different? So what is diversity? Diversity, and again, we are very intentional about this here. Diversity is not only your skin tone, your hair texture, your size of your lips, or the color of your eyes, or even the shape of your body. Your diversity is in your thought. You can very easily, very simply, and there are so many today, have someone who looks exactly like me, who thinks, acts, votes, suggests, the same type of thinking that advances white supremacy, capitalism, and racism. Okay, so we're not concerned as much with. Now, let me be clear. Representation matters. It's very important for little Black girls to see bigger Black girls who are doing stuff. Who are in spaces that these Black girls can imagine themselves in. That's important. Black boys the same, brown boys the same, brown girls the same, LGBTQ, whatever space that you find yourself in is very important for you to be able to see yourself reflected, in the spaces that you're around. Very important, okay? But just because you have a Black or brown face or an LGBTQ, status that you are, doesn't mean that here it's different. It doesn't mean that you're thinking, it doesn't mean that you're diverse here. So if in you, and a lot of times we talk to businesses and organizations and churches, if, you are staffing your boards and your leadership teams and your supervisor teams with individuals who all think the same, but have different visuals, you don't have diversity. Okay. So just so we know, and I could spend hours on this stuff because you all know I love it, but I'm not going to because I want to get to my thought today. But diversity is actually diverse thought. There are so many people who don't want diversity. Okay, not only, a lot of people are getting past we don't want to see a visual difference because, quotas, and it's very obvious to see when a person walks into your organization or your church or wherever and recognize that, okay, there's nobody Black or brown here. So organizations have gotten smart and said, okay, we need to get some Black or brown people around here so that we can look like we value diversity. And then they go and choose the Black and brown individuals who think exactly like them, who make absolutely no waves, who are not, who are just like them. Everything about them, is cookie cutter. Now, let me be clear. Living in America, living in Michigan, living on this continent, almost this whole continent, but especially here in America, because that's where we are, we can talk about America, living here, in order for Black and brown individuals, specifically Black, okay, right now, specifically Black, because our brown brothers and sisters, a lot of them came over by choice, regardless to how they came here. Because again, all of us came here some kind of way. We weren't here. So, and this is the land that, it's not our land, it's our land, as in the world's land. But anyway, so those who, those of us who are here, in order for us specifically Black people to survive once they, were freed from slavery, was to become like white folks, because that's the only way that we would be hired for different things. So to be fair, there are many Black people, and then of course, especially now brown people as well, who are working these jobs, who are in your churches, on your leadership teams, who are highly skilled, highly talented individuals who simply want what everybody wants in life, and that is a decent life for themselves and their families and their children, who have decided that the easiest way to get that is to conform. We shouldn't place them in that position. Yes, we need them to not conform, but we get it, that's what you're doing. It's not helpful to themselves or to the rest of us. It's damaging to all of us for them to continue to do that. But to be fair, in society, even still today, that's the only way that a lot of people are able to get ahead. And sometimes people just want to live. And so I get it, what I mean? That doesn't make it good. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it easy for us. It doesn't bring about any type of real change, but there you have it, okay? Diversity, like I said, people don't want, they want cookie cutter versions of themselves, and organizations, business, churches, people, etc. They're like, you know what? We can bring you in here because you look different, but you act the same, you think the same, your solutions are the same. Groupthink, yay, come in. That's not diversity, okay? So you and your organization and your businesses, if you're trying to fulfill this branch of diversity, make sure that the people that you're bringing in challenge you. Make sure that the people that you assemble, because you can have individuals who are white who actually challenge other white people. They exist. I know they're far and few, and it's hard to find them, but they actually exist. White folks who actually don't think the same as other white folks. They are out there. Those of you who are assembling your teams, if you don't have diversity of thought, you don't have diversity. Okay, you just don't. Now you got representation as far as the physical, but you don't have diversity. So let's make sure that we're transforming in that way. Okay, I said I wasn't gonna spend a lot of time on there. There was 3 more minutes on diversity. I'm off of that one for now. Let's go on to the next one. Equity. Equity is the key to everything, okay? If you have a diversity and inclusion plan, you might as well just scrap it, drop it in the trash, and start over, okay? Because you don't have what you need. It's like trying to make a cake, any of my cake makers out there, without flour. You're not making a cake without flour, not the traditional type of cakes, okay? It's like, playing basketball without the team, without bodies, okay, on the team. But my sports teams, if you don't have equity, imagine having a sports event with no people, no team there, okay? That's how equity is. You don't have equity, you don't have anything, okay? Equity is an acknowledgement and an awareness of barriers and action centered around elimination of those barriers, okay? It's an awareness, it's an acknowledgement of barriers that are existing, and then action. It's not just sitting back, oh, I read a book, I know the lack of equity that we have, I've arrived. No, you haven't. You've not arrived because of much learning. Okay. Any of us, in our organizations and businesses, any business owners, putting together a great business plan, writing it out and sitting it on your desk, or reading and studying it and putting together this amazing PowerPoint and then never presenting it, never doing anything with it, it's nothing. That's not success. You haven't arrived. Okay, you got to follow all the way through. You got to do something with it. Being aware what equity is or lack of equity and doing something with that awareness, doing something which is actually centered around elimination of those barriers. I put a video, a little cartoon clip on my Facebook page, my Meeting of Diverse Minds page, a couple of days ago, I believe, probably about a week ago or so, where it showed, I forget the title of it, but anyways, so it showed the experience that Black and Brown individuals have in America, and the barriers that are placed in their way. So it shows like, slavery, it shows Reconstruction and how it, Jim Crow after it, Black codes. It shows, connection that white folks have and resources that white folks have and the lack of barriers that they have that just allow them to breeze through on what was a racetrack. It showed, redlining and all these different barriers that are in place for Black and Brown individuals that keep them from, just advancing in life, just having a decent life, just providing for themselves and their children. Being aware on your jobs as CEOs, as board members, as business owners of the awareness of barriers without intentionally eliminating those barriers, you're doing a grave disservice to us. And again, take your DEI signs down until you're ready to do equity work in that DEI scope. Elimination of barriers acknowledges that there's a barrier, that it exists, and that we need to do something about it. I want you to watch that video because I could go on when it comes to equity for a long time. But if you're not ready to do something with the knowledge that you've gained, if you're not ready to balance the playing field, and there is absolutely no way that we can imagine, even a Black woman, a lot of times that day comes around where they'll say, I think in September or somewhere, where they'll say, Black women today, will need to earn so much to make up for what white men have already earned the whole year, right? So we're always, centuries behind what a white man has earned. There's a way to change the income that a Black woman has to be equitable there. And we're not ready to have the conversation, sadly, about reparations. We're not ready to have that in our organizations. We're not ready as CEOs, board members, et cetera, to have the conversation around reparations, because that's the only way that you're going to have some measure of equity in your work. Again, become aware of the barriers, acknowledge that they exist, and then do something about them. We could have more conversation on what that doing looks like, but it's very important. Again, like I said, if you don't have equity, you have absolutely nothing with your DEI and anti-racism programs and initiatives, because it's everything. Inclusion is having a seat at the table, specifically related to policy and decision making. Inclusion assures that you have equal power and access. So now inclusion is not simply saying, hey, I'm sending you an invitation, come and join us. Inclusion is saying, this is what's occurring. For example, this business has been created, or this business has started, because we can actually have conversations about how far back inclusion needs to begin, and it does need to begin further back. But inclusion is not simply being invited to the party. Inclusion is designing the party, helping to pick out the music, to pick out the food items, to help pick out the decorations. Inclusion is having a part in the creation. Inclusion is not simply coming to the table and sitting there like a skeleton at a table, or like a teddy bear at a tea party that little girls have, and just sitting at the table like the stuffed animals, here, you've been included because you're sitting at the table. No, you're not, okay? Inclusion is taking into consideration everything that's being said by everyone and figuring out a way to incorporate that into what is created. Okay, it's not simply, this idea that I gave you an invitation and you came to the party and I asked you to dance. Like, what if I don't like the music? What if you don't have any music that I like, any music that I relate to, any music that speaks to me, any music that will, and you're not asking me, so how am I to be inclusive? You just want me to dance to your music? Like, why? That's not inclusion. That's this system that we currently have already that says our way, our style, we, us, white people, that our way is the way, and just come in and fit in to what we have going on. I like to say, get in where you fit in. No, that's not inclusion. And on the meaning of diverse minds with Keisha Hamilton, I've been very clear with you all in the past, and I want to make it clear now. I'm very specific about what occurs. I can't spend a lot of time trying to shelter your ears from reality or facts in this quest for transformation. I've also been clear that I recognize, and I hope you all recognize, that each one of us living here today none of us were the creators of this system that we're all trying to burn down and recreate. Okay, we weren't creators of it. We all were born into this, 50, 60, 40, however old we are. We've been living this life for a long time, and we've lived it in the best way that we know how. But as we get new information, as we learn better, as times change, we need to do better. We need to adjust. So we're not at fault for, what was, but we are at fault for what is and what can be. We have a responsibility as individuals. Fortunately, or unfortunately, it depends on how you look at it. We as human beings, we are interdependent beings. We just are. We were created that way. No one person makes it on their own. No one person, nobody. Even the first man, if you believe the story of creation, which I do, had some help. He had a person there who could help him. And eventually they had more people, you know what I mean? But even before he had that one person, he had the being who created him there to help him. Nobody makes it on their own, okay? We are all interdependent. Nobody is successful, whatever your idea of success is on your own. There are resources, there are people resources, there are financial resources, there are experience resources that people who are successful have that make them more successful. And those who don't have those resources, you recognize that they don't have the type of success, whatever it is that they even define it as, that they want. It's important for us to recognize, like I said, on the meeting of diverse minds, that we have a responsibility to each other. And this is why we have these conversations. Okay, so let's go on to racism. What is racism? Okay, that's that term that people are just so afraid of, racism, oh my God. But we're gonna talk about it because it's very important that we talk about it. All right. Okay, so what is racism? Racism is the marginalization. Marginalization is to assign the unimportant or powerless position, okay? Marginalization is when you assign an unimportant or powerless position to someone or to some group, okay? Marginalization. So when you think of marginalized, think of individuals, peoples, groups who are powerless and who are unimportant, okay? Maybe mosquitoes in the world of, animals. I don't like mosquitoes because they love me. I'm sure they actually have a function as well. I just try to keep them out my house, and I try to stay out of their area in the summer. But in my mind, mosquitoes should be marginalized because they just harm me, you know what I mean? But, I won't talk about humans because no human should be marginalized. But anyways, so racism is the marginalization or the oppression. Oppression is malicious or unjust treatment, often under governmental authority. I'm going to read that again because that's the key to racism versus prejudice, okay? Again, racism is the marginalization or oppression. Oppression is the malicious or unjust treatment, often under governmental authority. Okay, so racism is the marginalization or the oppression of people of color based on a socially constructed racial hierarchy that privileges white people. I know it's a long definition, right? But we need to get it all because all of it matters. When you call somebody a racist, you need to know what you're talking about. When you're experiencing racism, you need to understand what you're experiencing so that you can call it out. So you can say, hold on, that was racist right there. That was you marginalizing me, oppressing me based on my skin tone. And you're being privileged by this, and you're also bringing some type of authority into this space. And what type of authority is that? Oftentimes it's, the supervisor who's agreeing with your bad behavior in order to oppress me because I'm calling out something that you're doing wrong. Oftentimes it's cops coming to Black and brown individuals, oppressing them and marginalizing them and harming them based on a supposed fraction that they're letting white men specifically get away with. Oftentimes it's the experience of a white woman, the Karens that we're talking about in these stores getting upset at a Black woman, or usually a Black woman, but sometimes a Black man, like there was the young man in New York with the young lady. And it was oftentimes it's these Karens out here who are aggressively coming after a woman who's a Black woman who's filming her bad behavior because she's trying to get her to stop. And this white woman crying and saying, stop filming me, stop harming me, while she's the one that's the aggressor and in that position. But because she's a white woman and everybody around is saying, don't harm her, stop videotaping, don't show her bad. That's the racism and the oppression that Black and brown individuals have to experience almost every day, almost every single day. It's, almost every single day. That's racism. It's and racism, like I said, is different than prejudice because prejudice doesn't come with any power. And the power that we're talking about is that governmental authority. Okay, this idea that way back after the enslaved African Americans were released from slavery, and the government deputized white men to stop and question any Black person walking, and demand their papers basically because they were white men and they were Black. That's the reason why. Not because they had any training, I'm talking about white men at the time, they didn't have any training, they didn't have any good reason to be doing what they were doing, and yet they were being allowed to, have this sense of superiority. Here we go with, white supremacy. It was needed. It wasn't needed, but white folks felt it was needed because they had lost that by, having enslaved African Americans be released from that slavery. Oftentimes it's that governmental authority. It's that type of authority, this idea that my tears matter as a white person, a harm that I, have decided is a harm. You're going to find that all the time too. I've decided that you're harming me in this way, and therefore now I'm going to have to cry about it and get every other white person and the judges, because, we got this system, right? We've got the Karens. We've got Karens and Victoria's Secret. And then we've got the person behind the cash register who also looks like the Karen and who's sympathetic to the Karen. And then we've got the supervisor who of the person at the register who also looks like a Karen and thinks like that Karen. And then we've got the mall security who's a male, usually a white male, who's thinking, like these Karens and being protective of them. And then we got the cops who the security officer calls, who's thinking like this Karen. And then we've got the judges who, get deal with the ticket that the Black person has gotten, who also thinks like the Karen and acts like we've got this system of governmental authority that impacts people of color every day. That we don't acknowledge, and that also is the differing factor between it and prejudice. Okay, prejudice operates in almost the same way as far as prejudgment and a dislike for, etc., based on superficial things, generally your skin tone, maybe your hair texture, maybe your hairstyle, those of us who get our hair locked, maybe your confidence, maybe your beauty, maybe your don't care attitude and what they have going on. They get offended by those things, and then the system begins to work against you. In racism, in prejudice, you have all those things, but you don't have a system behind you that is affirming all of that wrong and bad bad behavior. Okay, spend a lot of time on that, and I'm done with that one for now. We'll talk about that more later. Anti-racism, what is it? Okay, because it's necessary for us to be that. Anti-racism is actively and intentionally working to dismantle and oppose racism. You've got to know what racism is in order to be anti-racist. You can't recognize what racism is if you won't acknowledge it, won't do your own work, and you cannot be anti-racist if you don't know what racism is. You can't work to dismantle something that you don't recognize. You can't work to dismantle something that you're not willing to acknowledge. It's so important to me that white people and Black people, all of us, recognize that we have been in this system that has told us that white is right, that white is superior, that straight is the ideal, that to talk and to address issues or not address issues is the way that you should go. To go along, to get along, to fit in, that this is how we operate. This is what we've been taught. Okay, everything that we're watching on TV, every movie, books, and things that were made, everything around us was this whole system that was saying white is right, white culture is right, and you need to fit into it in order to be right. If you are not, in your DEI and anti-racism efforts, if you are not questioning every single thing that you have going on, every single thought that comes into your head and says, where did I get that thought from? Where did that thought that I just accepted, where did it originate from? Is it upholding white supremacy? Is it upholding capitalism? Is it upholding this idea of not caring for humanity? If it is, then I need to be opposite than it. I need to be different than it. I need to be transformed from it. You can't be anti-racism, and you are not anti-racism if you're not willing to address everything from the Bible that you read, from the scriptures that you're listening to, from the scripture, what is it called? When they are, I'm sorry, I'm losing my thought. The idea that they're giving you by it. I'm sorry, I'm lost my thought. But anyway, so individuals who are preaching to you, they have their own thought processes that they are giving you. So when they're explaining what they are reading in scripture, their ideology is on that scripture passage. And if that ideology is upholding white supremacy, is upholding this idea that women are less than, if is upholding this idea that our LGBTQ brothers and sisters are demons, if it's upholding those ideas that humanity, that justice, that we shouldn't be fighting, if your preachers are not talking about how Jesus, what he did in the temple and how that's important, if your people are not telling you that, not every law is a just law and that there are some laws that need to be disobeyed, if they're not telling you that, then you need to question everything. Not only that, your own personal thoughts. You just need to question everything. That's what anti-racism is. It's not this idea that, I don't even know what people think anti-racism is actually, but I can tell you what it is. It's an awareness of racism, and it's working actively. It's not this idea that I'm gonna sit back in the corner and recognize that was racist. No, you see somebody doing something they shouldn't do. You see a Karen in the store attacking a Black woman because she's recording this woman, and the Black woman is recording her because she's trying to have some proof of what's occurring, so that when she goes to court and everybody says you were wrong, Black woman, because you she can say, no, look, this is what actually happened, and this is what she did to me. Because in our society, it doesn't even help most of the time, but sometimes it does. Or we can say, like in George Floyd's case, that there was wrongdoing here, and you need to hold these folks accountable. Like in Ahmaud Arbery's case, thank God these gentlemen had some accountability. There's no justice there, but there is some accountability. We oftentimes have to record because that's the only thing that you pay attention to. And then we get in trouble for that. Anyway, so anti-racism is actively working against those things. Okay, so this week we have just a few minutes, 20 minutes, okay? But I don't like to be on here for too long, so. But let's get into this thought because I'm super excited about it. So we all know Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday was Monday, well, at least it was observed on Monday. And one of the quotes that he quoted, I put on my page because it was very important to me. I had the opportunity to read his letter from a Birmingham jail the entire thing. It's a 6-page letter. I like to read, but anyway, so it's pretty long. It's for those who don't read, but it was very good, you know, to read his words. The title of this week was More Devoted to Order Than to Justice. So I'm gonna quote from Dr. Martin Luther King. You all know that I read fast sometimes, and I do that on this show, at least intentionally. I think I got somebody coming in. I do that on this show, I think, on this show, at least intentionally, because I don't have a lot of time. But you can Google a letter from a Birmingham jail by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and you can actually get this quote out of there yourself. And I encourage you to do so, read the entire quote. Those of you who are, you know, who follow me on my pages, you'll see that quote on the page as well. Feel free to, you know, look it up. So Dr. King says, I must make 2 honest confessions to you, my Christian and Jewish brothers. First, I must confess that over the last few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in the stride toward freedom is not the White Citizen Councillor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I can't agree with your methods or direct action. I'm sorry, methods of direct action. Who paternalistically feels that he can set the timetable for another man's freedom. Who lives by the myth of time and who constantly advises the Negro to wait until a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. This was Dr. King in 1963. Ibram X. Kendi in 2018 in his More Devoted to Order Than Justice article, which is in The Atlantic, you can Google that, said moderates in both political parties have long argued no on both fronts. Their political brand is unity. Where have you heard that before? We need to be unified. We need to present a unified front. That's a very, it's a white culture idea. This idea that it has to look, we don't care what it's like underneath. It just needs to look good, okay? They pursue the absence of tension. That has meant avoiding confrontations through building political bridges high above the audible river of children crying in detention facilities, in police cars and cells, in abandoned schools, in abuse-infested homes, in rat-infested apartments, in searches for incarcerated and deported parents, in funeral homes over closed caskets, in plantation shacks after their first whipping, and in slave auctions fearing their new harassers. This idea that we need unity and peace, everything just needs to look a certain way. So let's build this bridge high above all this mess that we are ignoring in our unity. Kevin Sherd, the problem isn't white nationals, it's white moderates, in the Baltimore Sun 2017 says, the silence of white moderates who won't speak up when faced with extreme racism exacerbates the problems we have today. White moderates have become comfortable with their lives and don't want to rock the boat or make too much noise. To white moderates, I say that your silence is aiding and abetting their agenda, and your moral leadership is needed now more than ever. And like Jay-Z said, men lie, women lie, numbers don't. The last time I looked at the population of the United States by race, the number of white Americans exceeded the number of African Americans living in this country by leaps and bounds. This again is in 2016 or 17 that this was written. The 2010 US Census found that whites make up 64% of the population, while African Americans only make up roughly 13%. Blacks really are the minority in number in this country. And you don't have to be good at math to understand that. We need leaders not in love with money, but in love with justice, not in love with publicity, but in love with humanity. Leaders who can subject their particular egos to the pressing urgencies of the great cause of freedom. A time like this demands great leaders. That was Dr. Martin Luther King in 1956. So now I'm a little bit off script on purpose. This was my design for tonight. We are here in 2022. We've been pushing diversity, equity, inclusion for, more than 10, 15 years across the nation, just that terminology. Obviously, anti-racism and, civil rights has been being fought by African Americans for many years since we got to this continent, we're forced onto this continent. But even during slavery and of course after slavery, we've been fighting for our rights and for acknowledgement and for recognition and for representation and for fair wages and for the appropriate living conditions and et cetera. Here we are in 2022, and the words that Dr. Martin Luther King spoke regarding the moderates. These are your white people who call themselves allies. Your white people who decide that I'm a friend to whoever they claim to be a friend to. I'm your friend. Black liberation, Black activists. I'm your friend. I care about you. I care about your cause. You're doing great work. Let me be clear. Black and brown individuals are humans, and we appreciate your support. We actually do. We appreciate your out loud support. We appreciate your financial support. We appreciate your actual support. Your support that costs you something, your sacrificial support. We appreciate your support. This idea that your words are enough is not enough. Okay, this idea that you're not willing to question everything that's coming in your mind, everything that you're feeding your mind, so that you can transform into the person that's fighting as hard as we are for the justice and for humanity. Choosing to be this pious, sweet, supposed ally. You're not an ally, okay? You're just a person that's just there, who's a white moderate, okay? It's 2022, and unless you are intending to do something with all this learning and all this awareness that you have gotten, especially here in the city that I live, so many of our CEOs and business owners, church pastors, so many people, are doing so much reading and talking and, attending the Black History, Martin Luther King Day breakfasts and dinners and events and yay, thank you for choosing to, trying to include yourselves in those worlds. I need you to remember that Dr. Martin Luther King said that our biggest threat to justice is the white moderate. That's our biggest threat to justice. It's not these racist white folks out here who are obviously racist. Now, clearly they're a danger and they need to be corralled and restricted so that they can't harm Black and brown folks. But it's these white folks these white moderates who are more concerned about order, who are saying to themselves, you know what, if you said it differently, then I can hear you. Do you know, and you don't know, okay? But let me just give you a little bit. We're talking individuals who have the pain and trauma of racism flowing and slavery and all that happened to their people flowing in their veins, who are living this life of trauma and pain every single day with white people, because we have to be here around you because we're here. We don't have enough money to go back to Africa. Our history was stolen from us. You know what I'm saying? Go back where? We can't find our people by design, okay? So here we are, here with you. We've got to be among you. We've got to work among you. We've got to, try to live among you. And so many of you choose not to, fully know our history and what we're experiencing so that you can and fully know your own history, because slavery is white history, okay? So you choose not to know your history and what that did to you and what it did to others and what it's still doing to us. And you wonder why, somebody Black will, out of frustration, out of pain, out of trauma, out of awareness that it's going nowhere, will either one just sink up under that and not say anything, will choose to kill themselves, and in different ways, whether they actually kill themselves or they kill their dreams, their desires, their hopes, will choose that, or will lash out in pain from the stuff that we're dealing with every single day. And then you want to have the audacity to say, I don't like your style, and so therefore I can't hear what you're saying, as opposed to, let me hear what you're saying, regardless to how you're saying it. Because if this is how you're saying it, it's probably because it's the only way you can get it out. So let me hear what you're saying. I have 6 children. I don't know if you all know that or not. Some of you do. I have 6 children. I am a woman who is very concerned with respect. Okay, it's one of my love languages. You know what I mean? Respect me. Period. That's just, and for whatever reason, and I explore those things. So why, Keisha, why do you think like this? I do my own work all the time. I'm a very self-reflective person. It's very healthy for a person to be. My children don't always tell me what they're experiencing in a way that I want to hear. They just don't. But I do not. I told my children, I said, listen here, if that's the only one, now clearly they're not cussing me out, okay? We don't do that over here. Just not that. Now you can control that much because I don't cuss. So, they ain't learning that from me. But they'll come and they'll have experiences that they're having, and they're passionate about it, and they're upset about it, and they're harmed, and they're, and I let them get it out. It's important. Let me hear you, not how you said it. That's immaterial to what you're experiencing. And what is my job as a parent, as a person who loves humanity, as a person who loves you, but to hear you. We have so many white people who are just, and it's important for white people to understand, you are in the majority right now. You have the jobs. You can set the salaries. You understand? You can decide who's on your board and who's not, who you're calling to come and do your meals and cater your events and do your professional development. And you can decide all that. And if your preference is for people who sound like you don't want diversity. If your preference is for people who look like you and who are going to give ideas in a way that sounds like you feel like it should sound, you don't want diversity, you don't want equity, you don't want inclusion, and you don't want anti-racism. You just don't. Okay, people, it is 6:51. Dr. Martin Luther King, like I said, he said, and I quote from him, he says, he's been gravely disappointed in the white moderate. He's almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in the stride toward freedom is not, at that time, the White Citizens Councillor or the Ku Klux Klan, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace. We can't get to any type of awareness of what's going on without agitation. If I don't tell you that this is wrong, which is going to agitate you, you're never going to know that it's wrong. You'll never know it's wrong, and you'll keep doing it, and you'll keep harming my community and me. You'll never know. We have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. We have to get comfortable with being discomforted. That doesn't come in a way that you like, in a way that you're familiar with, in a way that you prefer. That's just not how it happens. You don't build muscle by lifting 1 pound weights as an adult. You're just not building muscle like that. You don't, stay in shape by sitting on your bed all day and all night. You got to do something different. You just have to. And you've got to agitate yourself. You've got to. The moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I can't agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically feels that he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by the myth of time, and who constantly advises the Negro, wait until a more convenient season. Okay, people, thank you so much for joining another meeting of Diverse Minds with Keisha Hamilton. For more of this, join us in the next couple of weeks, where I'm likely going to have a speaker at that time, or I'll have someone joining me on the conversation at that time. I'm looking forward to that. Check out diversemindsconsulting.com, www.diversemindsconsulting.com. to book me, etc. But choose to be individuals, white people specifically, who are not more in love with order than justice, who are willing to not decide that there's a more convenient season. Tomorrow will, like, you know, you're wasting our time, your time, and the world's time. And people are dying, and that's at fault. Remember, we all have some accountability here. We all have some responsibility here. And you know, we need to be accountable to ourselves and to one another. I greatly appreciate you all joining me. I know that people who come and you know, join my show, when you join it, it's because you are on the quest and on the road to it. And I appreciate that. You know, without us doing this and then each one reach one and bring some more in, we'll get absolutely nowhere. So thank you for joining me. Please ask your siblings, your siblings, your husbands, your wives, your children, your coworkers to join this conversation. Feel free, you know, I didn't mention that before, but some of you have already done that. You know, feel free to, you know, add comments. I do read them, and you know, when necessary or you know, appropriate, I will respond to them. I appreciate you all just for joining. I'll see you all in 2 weeks. I am excited about what we have going on here in you know, in Jackson, at least right now, and you know, even for 2022. Okay, so bye people. Thank you for joining me. See you later.